Say what you want about the Paul brothers, but they've done a lot for professional boxing. In fact, before their decision to migrate from YouTube to the ring, boxing was quickly becoming an old man's game. And now that Jake has demolished a number of MMA fighters, he's gone on to say a lot in his new diss track. What's the meaning behind the hit though? And what else should you know? Stay tuned for more. First of all, let's talk about the diss track that was actually released by Paul. As it turns out, you can take the man out of YouTube, but you can't take the YouTube out of the man. At least, that's what Jake Paul showed us around a week ago when he dropped another infamous diss track. But rather than targeting another YouTuber like he has in the past, he decided to instead take shots at UFC president Dana White, along with a couple other prominent names in the UFC. Not exactly surprising, considering how much disrespect Dana and his cronies have thrown in Jake's direction, often saying that the YouTuber shouldn't be taken seriously for the public show he is currently putting on. That being said, Paul has undoubtedly worked hard for his unbeaten record, as since he's already defeated former UFC champions like Ben Askren, he feels like he should be given more respect for the unbeaten record he's achieved in the ring. For those of you who have yet to see it, the diss track starts off with a quick teaser of what's to come, and then quickly states that the diss is a parody in an attempt to avoid all liability that may follow. Like we said earlier, you just can't take the YouTube out of the man. The diss then opens with a small skit in which a Dana White lookalike is trying his best to convince a new UFC fighter to risk her life for minimal pay. And this wouldn't be the first time Jake has addressed the problem. Before the Askren fight, Paul criticized Dana White for similar reasons. He mentioned that UFC fighters wouldn't be lining up to take him on in the boxing ring if White was actually paying them well. He also stated that it was ridiculous how MMA contenders were locked into ridiculous long-term contracts after they were discovered by White, and that in many instances, a new fighter would have to choose between never being known in the octagon and suffering blow after blow to their head without sufficient pay. UFC fighters risk their lives every day they step into the spotlight, after all, with kings like Conor McGregor even suffering debilitating injuries and being left destitute for months on end without even a hint of healthcare assistance from the league. And that's precisely what Jake Paul suggests in this new video diss track of his. The strategy of raise pay-per-view prices while paying fighters less is instantly referred to by Paul and his posse. This makes the stand-in Dana White sweat after finally being called out, which sees Paul then swiftly hit him against the head with a baseball bat. The screen though goes dark with a diss track following. It's a brilliant start that says a lot about the state of the UFC right now, and it shows that Paul isn't just after fame and fortune. He also wants to make a difference in the league, which is much needed at the moment. Other fighters have also spoken up about this problem in the past, but not to this extent. White isn't the only member of the UFC to be called out by Paul. After a couple repetitions of the line F Dana, Jake Paul quickly turns his attention to Jorge Masvidal, the American UFC fighter that has criticized him in the past for being nothing more than a punk. Masvidal was the one who accused Paul of fixing his fights, stating that anyone in the UFC would be able to put him on his back in no time, so it's not at all surprising when Paul pokes fun at the fighter by mentioning his lackluster bank balance. Other fighters targeted include the likes of Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, and of course Khabib Nurmagomedov, all of whom at one point or another referred to Jake as nothing more than a YouTuber. But to a large extent, the rap is all about bringing awareness to the problematic aspects in the UFC at the moment. White has been refusing to allow members of his league to fight against Paul and earn an extravagant amount of money for doing so. And since he holds the monopoly on MMA stardom, contenders can't exactly disagree with him. It's either fight for minimal pay or disappear completely. Just check out the closing statements of the diss track and you'll see what we mean. And in Paul's own words, I'm keeping my foot on your neck until you tap, showing that things between him and Dana are far from over. Don't take it from us though, as Jake Paul has now explained his vision behind the track. While talking to MMA Fighting a couple of days ago, he elaborated on the need to release the diss track as he did. In his opinion, Dana White has been getting away with being the monopoly man of MMA for far too long, and contenders in the sport are suffering for it. He also went on to state that things are oddly personal between him and Dana, which added fuel to the fire. To a certain extent, the diss track was like a therapy session for Paul, who had a lot to say, but didn't know how else to say it. Remember, Dana bet that Ben Askren would wipe the floor with Paul when their fight was announced, along with Tyron Woodley after that. But when both fighters fell to Paul, he went on a tirade about how Paul was only fighting washed-up competitors. When this didn't work, he went on to say that Paul was no doubt fixing his fights, with accusations like these being followed by further doping allegations. With that being said, Jake has passed every drug test he's been subjected to, and was no doubt sick of all the unfounded allegations when he launched himself into this diss track. But it wasn't just about personal healing. According to Paul, Dana White's too busy sending out lawsuit threats to his heavyweight champions minutes before they enter the cage. No doubt a reference to the massive amount of disrespect White showed Francis Ngannou a few months back. Paul isn't the only one to talk about this flagrant disrespect of the UFC champion. It's been an issue of contention in the UFC for quite some some time now. For those of you who don't know, White actually just sent a lawsuit threat to Ngannou's agent, Markel Martin, just minutes before he was set to head into the octagon to fight. According to reports, this letter of demand was sent because Martin has been caught speaking to others about organizing a boxing match for Ngannou, and this was clearly not to Dana White's liking, but Ngannou didn't let this get to him and ended up winning the fight in an incredible display of skill. The disrespect didn't stop there though, with White being absent from the octagon and later stating that he had an issue to take care of backstage. But according to Paul, this was done for one reason and one reason only. If a championship fighter like Ngannou wants to step into the boxing ring for more money, it shows that the UFC isn't doing enough to secure its own fighters, and if the league was to increase the pay of these contenders while supplying them with sufficient health care, there's no doubt that they wouldn't be interested in boxing against a so-called YouTuber. And it goes without saying, but the disc track that's been viewed around 2.8 million times could very well be the start of an uprising. We know a couple of UFC fighters who've been waiting for a moment like this, so we'll see what happens next. In boxing news, it sounds like Ryan Garcia's next fight has been set. Fans of the Flash King Rye will be happy to hear that their favorite boxer will be heading to the ring once more in April, and as it turns out, he'll be taking on the one and only Emmanuel Tagoe of Ghana at the San Antonio Alamo Dome. For those of you who don't know, Tagoe was last seen beating Mason Menard into submission, which resulted in him walking away with the win by majority decision. This was back in 2020 though, with Ryan Garcia having also been gone for quite some time. In other words, the fight has quite a bit of hype following it at the moment, with fans wanting to see whether the contenders have been relaxing or training on their time off. After thanking Tagoe for actually taking the fight, Garcia went on to say that he can't wait, and with the state of the two fighters at the moment, we can't either. And there you have it, everything you need to know about the Jake Paul situation and other important boxing news. What do you think of the lack of pay in the UFC though? And do you think this diss track will change anything? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below.